In this episode of Halfway to Healing, we will be discussing topics that may be triggering to some listeners. We will be discussing eating disorders and violence against women in relation to identity. While we have tried to use recovery-focused and inclusive language and do not go into explicit detail, please be advised that this may be triggering to some. Please reach out to your support systems if you are triggered by the content in this episode.
Hey friends, welcome back to Halfway to Healing. I'm Shana.
And I'm Sam, and today's episode is one that is really close to our hearts. We're going to be talking about identity and how it can often be framed as something that holds us back when, at least from my experience, it's what's kept me going.
We'll talk about the masks that we've worn, the conditioning we've unlearned, and how identity, in all of its complexity, can be a source of clarity, connection, and strength. So whether you're questioning, reclaiming, or just curious about what it means to truly be yourself, this one's definitely for you. So let's dive in.
I think it's interesting. Identity is such a huge thing for me. I mean, being non-binary.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I have phlegm in my throat off the bat. This happened last time too. It's like I started talking and my mouth was like, nope. No, what was I saying? Identity is a really big one for me. Being non-binary and having to discover what that meant for me, navigating a lot of relationships around that as well, because not everyone is super understanding. But also being bisexual and being in a very lesbian presenting relationship as well. Like, identity is huge for me, and I'm not sure how you have come to terms with your identity.
So I don't myself personally represent as being non-binary or bi or lesbian. I myself consider myself be a cisgendered woman.
You're multiple women.
Yeah, I am multiple people, a cisgendered woman and straight, heterosexual myself. Obviously, it's not something I have personally struggled with, but I remember our friendship first sort of started growing right during the time just before you came out, and then more so when you were still not exploring it, but I think going through the processes that you had to go through and seeing the struggles that you've faced, and, you know, being misgendered. And even now, we were just talking beforehand, before we started recording, how we have an election here in Australia at the moment. And you were saying how even though you have changed your name, legally, I was there with you when you changed your name. I was there with you when you were with the JP signing all these documents, and how you went to verify or prove that you're voting. You said your name and it was still in your dead name, which is terrible. Like, it's been, everything is all legal now. It's all been changed. And
updated with the Electoral Commission. Like, it's like one of the many things that I had to update.
Yeah, and it's still
licenses. But even though I updated it, it was still in my dead name. I will put a little disclaimer for any queer or LGBTQ plus people that my preferred terminology for my previous name is dead name. Everybody does have a different terminology that they use. That's my preferred terminology, and I know Shana and I will be using that, but that doesn't always sit right with everybody, and that's okay too. I just realized that as you were saying that I should just mention that's my preferred terminology, and that's how we'll be talking about it here.
And also, out of respect for Sam, we're not going to mention their dead name either as well.
Thank you.
If anyone's curious, if people are like, what was Sam's dead name? It's like, none of your business.
Yeah, basically, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what's so crazy? Like something you kind of talked about, you had said, because you don't identify as, LGBTQ plus, that you haven't struggled with that specifically. True, but I imagine you would have struggled with some parts of your identity, especially with your eating disorder and things like that. It's not like a blanket thing that only this subset of the
definitely
subset of the population experiences issues with their identity.
I know. I don't know if this is something you experienced when you were going through the recovery for your eating disorder. But I know I can't remember if it was one of my psychologists or someone eating disorder related specialist often at times would give my eating disorder a name or its own persona. And I would often have activities where I would draw what I imagined that eating disorder part of me looked like. And for me, it was almost like a twin. So the eating disorder was still looked like me and had my name and stuff, but it was like almost like an evil twin, I guess one would say.
An evil twin. I love that so much.
Yeah. So it's like a part of you, but it's not. It's just sort of this almost like a foreign person that's taken over your body is how I would best describe it. Whereas other people, say, for instance, would see it as like an animal or something. I don't know how if you ever did anything like that in your treatment.
I don't think I don't think I ever specifically drew what my eating disorder looked like. But I've definitely done a lot of parts work and like, okay, that's the eating disorder part talking. I know separating, like being able to separate myself. I had my eating disorder since I was about 5. So, you know, a lot of my early developmental kind of finding out who am I was very much clouded. So it was quite a challenge to separate out the eating disorder part, because it was almost like I've almost always had this, at least as far back as I can possibly remember. I don't know anything outside of that. It was because of my eating disorder recovery that I started finding who I was in just like outside of the eating disorder, that I realized, oh my gosh, I'm actually non-binary as well.
Exactly.
I don't think, I can't say for sure, obviously, but I don't think if I hadn't come to that point in my eating disorder recovery and figuring out, okay, my whole identity is not tied to this disorder, that I don't think I would have been able to figure out who I was from a gender perspective as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love this, the evil twin though. I love that, like, like this is my evil twin.
Because I think a part of me will always still be like sort of not seeing it as me, but seeing it as a part of me that sort of formed spontaneously one day. Like looking back, I can see there was a build up of things. But yeah, it's me, but it's also not me. And that really resonated more so with me than it being like an animal or someone who looks different from me, because in hindsight, it was still me, I guess. Yeah. But not me, if that makes any sense.
Does that help? I don't know. I mean, I don't know for sure, but does that help, like, with that evil twin kind of I don't think it's perception. I think it's perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, that evil twin perspective. I was like, as a word here.
Yeah.
Does that help? Like, if, I don't know about you, but I know for me, like, I still sometimes get, like, the eating disorder cognitions. Does that, like, having that kind of, being able to identify that part as the evil twin kind of help manage those cognitions?
Absolutely. Like, I know those thoughts are always still, like, in the back of my head. And if certain things will, like, not necessarily trigger them, but make them more prominent. Like if I've been stressed or something, or when I had uni exams, that voice would definitely get a lot louder for me. Those type of environments were really quite intense, and I would be able to identify it. I'd be like, okay, that's this thought that's in the back of my head. It's not quite me, but it's still like, it was still quite strong at that point. Now I think going through like therapy and stuff, I have been able to push aside that thought, be like, okay, there's that thought, there's that evil twin thought. And I can most of the time now push it sort of also to the side.
I actually have started doing that with my self-criticism. I named it Bob.
Really?
My self-criticism is Bob. And so when
my
self-criticism, yeah, it's the only name I could think of at the time. So now when that comes up, I'm like, okay, that's Bob. It's okay, Bob. You know, we're chilling. We don't need to, we don't need to worry about that. It's all good. You're all fine. But, thanks for the heads up,
Yeah.
So I think in all of my everything, like in all of my different diagnoses, like a big thing that pops up and health professionals often tell me to be cautious of is like, you as a whole are not that disorder, right? Like I'm not my bipolar. Exactly. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not
so much more than all
these.
I'm
so much more. I know I'm a bit of a collation. Is that a word?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not like.
Collection?
No, it's a coalition. That's the word I'm thinking of.
There you go.
I'm not a coalition. Maybe that's not right either. Oh well, I'm a collection I'll find
Yeah,
a word
just
that
a
does work.
mishmash.
I'm a mishmash of all these things. But
Yeah.
then even outside of like diagnoses and recovery and everything, you know, also, you know, I'm reliable and I'm intelligent and I'm a really like, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
identity is such a strong thing because I think people are very much made up of experiences and
Mm-hmm.
you know, the thoughts we have, the feelings we have, the experiences that we go through, the relationships that we have with other people. And it's kind of interesting. It's like this nice kind of
Mm-hmm.
artwork almost of,
Yeah.
you know, like an abstract artwork where it's like
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't make something specific, but it's like bits of paint, different colors, all of that pulled together to make a person.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's super fascinating.
I think it's amazing. Yeah. And I really liked how you said, oh gosh, I can't remember what it was, but how you were like, you're fun, you're bubbly. And that really resonated with me as well. Cause I'm like, okay, I remember when I was quite deep in my eating disorder, I was, you know, I wasn't me. I was grumpy. I was irritable. I was a bit more mean. I hope I'm not mean, but I was like,
I don't
mean
think you're
and
mean, Shana. You're all good.
Thank
I don't think you have a mean bone in your body.
Thank you. I would like lash out. I was more lethargic and tired, and that's not me. And so that was evil twin me, you know, and that's not my personality. And my personality, I like to think of myself as more kind and fun and funny. I like to, yeah.
It's I think it's also something that's come up a lot with the election is almost the politicization of identities.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of issues in communities that I'm in with, and I'm trying not to get too political, but I do want to, you know, like it's often weaponized. Someone's identity, you know, whether you're a woman and that's the part that's being weaponized and politicized, or if you're in, or like me in the LGBTQ plus space, that's also weaponized. And I won't get into the politics of it, but it's really damaging and harmful, especially for people in the LGBT community, like we talked about, like the fact that my dead name was being used in the roles, like that's, I very much have a lot of discomfort around the use of my dead name. It's not my name, it's not how I identify. But I know that I'm very lucky that I can cope with that. Not everyone can do that. A lot of, you know, and so I think there's so much harm in weaponizing it and politicizing it and making it topics. And it's important to some degree because obviously we need policies to protect these people. But it's when policies and funding and all of that is being taken away. And I think, and it's incredibly hard. And even, you know, unless you're a straight white male.
Yep.
There's a lot of harm that's done through our governments, and this doesn't just happen in Australia. This happens all across the world. And I get like I wonder like have you ever felt limited with the fact that like you are a woman or like whether that's in the healthcare setting?
Absolutely. So like I'm gonna go back to like flashback to little like 8-year-old me all the time. I don't know if this. I mean, I feel like it's a very common thing. Teachers would be like, now I need 3 strong boys to help me carry these chairs. And I'm just there like, okay, I can do this as well, you know? Like, I don't have any limitations. To
carry a chair in, like, primary school? Yeah, I think anyone can handle that task.
Yeah, exactly. Why is the teacher singling out that they need boys to help with this? I'm like, what do you... Yeah, and even, like, in, like... Obviously, I listen to a lot of true crime, and so many victims always females. And I'm like, man, that's terrible. And like, I know, well, I don't know, but I still have, like, I understand, I know that it's not likely to happen, but I still, when I'm walking alone at night, if I've been out in the city, I still have a very strong fear that something is going to happen to me and that I am more of an easy target because I am a woman, you know? Yeah, that's a very true fear of mine. And I know that the chances of that are quite slim. But, you know, with crime rates having increased and like youth crime, as a woman, that's something that really scares me. Walking alone at night, I'm sure.
I mean, I very much understand that fear.
Yeah.
Just, I was assigned female at birth. And I know there's been times where I've been on a bus, you know, catching a bus home late at night, and either there was an instance where I thought someone was going to follow me off the bus, and I just caught it to the end of the line. I was like, I would rather stay on this bus and catch the next bus going back to where I need to go, to where there's cameras and lights, and I'm not walking down dark suburban streets.
Yeah, exactly.
At 11 at night.
Yeah.
And it's a real fear that a lot of people have. And when I think I speak from experience as someone who's experienced many different traumas, especially at the hands of men, that's amplified if you've gone through it once.
Yeah.
You know, and that's crazy. Like, it's crazy that that's kind of the way we have to think. And especially, I mean, I'm not exactly a big buff person. And so I often worry, you know, I'm smaller, I do come across as almost like you said, an easy target.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's always just in the back of your mind. And and a lot of people, straight white men, don't have that fear and don't realize that this is a genuine fear for a lot of people. You know?
Yeah. I very distinctly one night remember you calling me because I think someone was not necessarily following you, but they were quite, they were like almost following you, and you called me and just wanted it to seem like you were having a conversation with someone so this person wouldn't approach you. I don't know if you remember that, but that was quite...
I've done it so many times to so many different people. Yeah,
that was quite... Like, I can only imagine how scary it would have been for you, because I was freaking out as well. I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah.
No, and it is. And there's, you know, it's like crossing the street, or, you know, how are you gonna take this situation, and you're like, all that quick thinking, assessing situations, all that, that's exhausting, right? Like, like having to assess a situation, and it happens in the middle of the day, little, you know, it's just awful.
Yeah, I can only imagine so much of what
it probably doesn't help that you're constantly listening to true crimes where this stuff actually does happen.
No, I know. Yeah.
This is not me blaming you, because I also think true crime's really interesting.
Yeah, like the crime.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
That was a little derailment from Identity.
Yes,
but
I
think it is something that people like, just to try and put a nice little bow on that. It, like, that's very much your experience as identifying as a woman, right? It's like, is this fear of what could happen at any time? I don't even want to just say late at night down a dark alleyway, because I mean, statistically speaking, you are more likely to be assaulted by someone that you know, and you would probably know that terrifying. Based on your true crime stuff and your degree in forensic science.
Yes. Yeah, but I think I feel like for me that's the scariest part of it as well. Like, I can't remember what the number, like what percentage it is, but the fact that most of the time, like, I can name so many true crime cases where, and I guess that's why as well, when there is a case of, you know, someone missing, the first person that police look at is the spouse, you know, immediate family, because it has that evidence backing it up. I think, how, as being someone who identifies as non-binary, how would you say that how has this impacted you, obviously being like still presenting as, in most cases, more feminine? Because I know I've been with you countless times being misgendered and stuff. How does that impact you? How does that feeling like your whole identity is just being, you know, swept under the rug, ignored, you know? And I can only correct someone so many times. But how's that experience been for you?
I do quite often present in a more feminine way. And again, just to clarify the terminology, I will be using feminine and masculine as a way of talking about it. I do present more in a feminine way. There's a lot of the main reason behind that is actually the fact that I have 24 years worth of feminine clothing and about 6 months worth of masculine clothing that has come from friends donating things to me, because their donations, not a lot of that kind of, those clothes don't fit me in a way that feels comfortable. So it is really hard, especially on, and then being of a smaller stature, it it can be a little challenging to find clothing, both in either gender expression. Finding clothes that fit me is incredibly difficult. And anyway, my point is I do sometimes appear more feminine to, especially to like people who, I think it's so easy for people to people's brains basically want to take as much, like take in so much information. There's patterns and recognition. It's a whole interesting neuroscience thing, and make that kind of assumption about me. I mean, it's really challenging to navigate. It almost, you're right, I can only correct people so many times. And the people in my life who do it the worst,
I know what you're about to say.
It's my family. And which is really, really shitty. And because I mean I live with my family, and so it's challenging because sometimes I don't have the capacity to correct people. I just don't. I'm going through shit, I just like whatever. It also happens a lot in medical settings, which is especially hard because it's even harder in medical settings because not legally, it's not a legal issue, but for my healthcare I do have to write my assigned gender at birth. That is information they need to know. There are aspects of my anatomy that are important in a healthcare setting to know that I've got. I don't need my prostate checked. I don't have one. You know? So it's hard because, you know, all of those documents, you know, have all of that, kind of have all of the, you know, the more cis female kind of information on them. And so that it's challenging. And it's even more frustrating because some people just don't. Like, you can correct them. I just tap into the kind of powerful parts. I just have to remind myself that there are really good, inclusive people. And there's actually this really beautiful story. One of my clients, when I came out, realized that they had nothing saying that they were open about Indigenous and the LGBT community, and actually asked me to help kind of facilitate that. So we helped create little, like a footer a footer and an email signature that was like, you know, we acknowledge country, and also, you know, this is a safe, inclusive, diverse space for people who identify whatever gender, whatever sexuality, and it's stuff like that that gives me a little bit of hope that people do want to learn. And a lot of it is, you know, the photographer that we're actually seeing on Tuesday, she made a post about the previous photo shoot that we did, and had misgendered me. And it is a learning curve, but I ended up sending her a message. I was like, hey, just so you know, these are the pronouns I use. And fixed it. Like, it's so weird to me because they, them is not...
Exactly.
Is not the go-to, and it's crazy because it's gender neutral. It's like, why are we not just saying they, them for everything? Because then it doesn't matter what people like until you know what people's pronouns are, because it is gender neutral. It covers everybody. But I do sometimes feel like depending on the setting I'm in, like healthcare settings, things like that, I do sometimes feel I have to almost minimize that part of me. And almost hide it because it's too it feels to me too complicated. But I think at the end of the day, it is ultimately an advocacy thing, and it's something I need more help in. Like, how do I correct people? How do I do this? Because it's, as a people pleaser, so difficult to be like, actually, like, I don't want, you know, and also, I also have to constantly come out to people. Like, if I am meeting someone new, I feel like, so that they use my correct pronouns, I have to be like, by the way, I'm non-binary and use they, them. Other people don't do, like, don't have to do that in every social setting that they're in, and that's also really challenging.
When I think about it, and obviously I have people in my life that aren't very accepting of, you know, trans, LGBT community, and so often if I'm talking to people in my family about you, I will just say your name, because I know as soon as I use your pronouns, they're instantly going to correct me. And I'm like, well, that's not actually correct. And when in hindsight, what they're doing is making it more difficult on themselves by actively choosing to say the wrong thing, which it's a lot simpler if you just use the right ones. Whereas these people are like, okay, no, I know that, but I'm going to go against that. And that's just, you're making things way more difficult, but not only like you, but also themselves as well. And like a very good example I like to use for people that I know that aren't very welcoming of it, I say, you find someone's lost wallet, you go, oh, I can't wait to give it back to them, you know, because you don't know who it's going to be, unless there's like a driver's license picture in there or what. But, you know, you find something of someone's that is not necessarily an identifier of who they are. You see someone drop something, like, oh, I got to give this back to them.
I think it's so interesting. I have to admit, I was very guilty of this myself before I came out, where I would especially if I was reading like academic stuff, like academic papers, I would like typically gender the authors based on the name or whatever, something you know. And I realized, or like, you know, very like choosing like very gendered, this guy, like, you know. But since coming out, and not that I didn't realize this before, but I think it's a societal thing where it's like kind of ingrained that everything is on this binary gender spectrum. And since coming out, I'm like, oh, this person or this, you know, or, you know, I've become a lot neutral in my language choices around describing people, because even if someone is dressing femininely or masculinely, that their expression is not going to necessarily reflect their identity. And I don't think it's fair, at least I don't think it's fair from experience to just assume how people might identify. I think there's a whole, you know, identity and expression of identity and like all of this, you know, that goes on in, I think, all spaces, even if you don't realize it, right? Like everyone is choosing to express their identity in different ways. Some people have tattoos, piercings, the clothing choices that the clothing choices that you make, certain rituals, the spaces that you go to and kind of participate in.
It's how people best feel comfortable expressing themselves, you know?
No, absolutely.
So I think I'd really like to know, and I'm sure our listeners would like to know, how identifying as non-binary has, in a sense, saved you, helped you?
I very much feel like myself. I don't think I realized that there was a lot missing, but like and you can attest to this, we hang out and all the time, but I am so much more confident. I am so much more, like, the strides I've made in various parts of my recovery journey since coming out have been so much more founded, I think. Not that's not quite the right word, but like my efforts are more there. Like I feel like myself more. I don't feel like I'm hiding. I don't feel like I'm living in this weird kind of space of like confusion. So I definitely feel a lot more confident, and I know that I've had a couple of people in my life say that like I seem brighter, and
I've definitely noticed that with you.
So I think that's kind of how, and also being called by the right name as well. You know, like
I remember the first time we like grabbed a coffee and it had Sam on it. You were so excited.
I know. I think I took a picture of it. I was like, oh my God, it's got my name on it.
You did. Yeah. You were so excited.
But even little things, like I can spell my name now.
Yeah.
I could not spell my dead name to save my soul. Constantly typing and writing it wrong. But yeah, I have so much more confidence. I feel like I can connect to people better because I'm not hiding a part of myself to me, which means I'm also not hiding that part of myself to other people.
Yeah.
So I feel more authentic. I feel more real. I can be more vulnerable and trust people more because there's not this part of me that feels like it's missing or that it's wrong or... And I still struggle with it a little bit. Like, you know, I do sometimes wonder, would it not be easier if I just, for lack of a better phrase, went back in the closet? Like, you know, like dealing with all of the stuff that we've kind of talked about, the fact that I have to correct people's pronouns and trying to find masculine clothes to wear that I can afford. You know, all of these things are really hard. And I bring this up because I don't want people to think that I'm perfect. I am not perfect.
Yeah.
And I still struggle with that. And it's like, you know, or someday, I think the biggest struggle is some days I want to be completely gender neutral. And how on earth do I find clothing that is gender neutral that I also own? You know, and there's, you know, I'm going to a festival and for the first time I'll be wearing something completely masculine. I'm going as a male character. And that's terrifying for me. I've never done that. I've never... You know, like, I mean, I've got 25 years of being feminine.
Yeah.
I've lived a very feminine experience and there's a lot of fear there, but also excitement that there's a new part of me that I can explore and explore with the people that I love.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think I know, but how would you feel about sharing your, I want to say, awakening, but that doesn't sound right.
My gay awakening. No, gender awakening. What?
Yeah, your like signs and how you're like, okay, this, because obviously, I know your story, and how you came to be Sam. So how did you come to be Sam? What was it like?
Honestly, terrifying. So
yeah, I can imagine.
I know that we have plans to talk about this in a lot more depth.
Yeah.
In a later episode.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of things I was seeing in some of my therapy groups, in particular in the trans people that I was meeting that I have learnt to come to realize was something called gender envy. And I just felt that they had this like just such authenticity and realness, and there was just something in it that I saw. And one night I was washing my dishes and my brain, I had this, what I thought was an intrusive thought that was like, I don't think I'm female. And I thought it was nothing. I have very weird thoughts all the time. Okay. Sometimes my brain's like, let's drive off a bridge. And we're not doing that.
Yep.
It's crazy. Don't drive off bridges. You know, so I'm used to having a lot of just kind of wacky thoughts.
Yeah.
And it didn't go away like I thought it was. And with having ADHD and bipolar, my thoughts are very fleeting. I don't often hold a thought very long. So for this thought to come and just kind of be plastered on my brain, I was like, I should probably look into this. Like this is sticking. And I went to a LGBTQ plus counseling service because I was really freaked out by this thought. I was like, this is the most terrifying thought I've ever had. Yeah. And I think about driving off bridges. But this thought was terrifying me.
That was the scary one.
That was a scary one. And I worked through it, and I did a lot of identity work. I like homework in my therapy. I don't know if you like homework in your therapy, but I'm like, give me shit to do at home. Otherwise it will not stick.
Yeah. If it's not from the physio, it's from the psychologist, you know?
And I did this, I literally broke down my entire identity, who I was, how I wanted to present, things that I didn't realize were part of my identity as a child, like the fact that I was often told to wear dresses or act like a girl, and I hated it. And like, I was never a Barbie person. I think I owned one Barbie and I set it on fire. Okay. You know, like, sacrificed it to the Beanie Babies.
The Beanie Babies.
The Beanie Babies.
Oh, gosh, I loved the Beanie Babies.
I had like such a collection of Beanie Babies growing up, and I didn't want any of the tags removed because I wanted them to have worth.
Yeah, I know. My parents, well, my mum would always be like, don't rip off the tag, but I would, and now, I should have
make millions off them.
I know.
On the Beanie Babies, I ended up getting rid of my collection. I think I had close to 400 Beanie Babies.
Damn,
I got rid of them one year because I was an edgy teenager who was like, I don't need Beanie Babies. And I wish I had them. I would make thousands of dollars off these Beanie Babies now. But no, so I did all this work with the counselor. I had a lot of help from my best friend at the time, who's actually my partner now, and asked her questions, and she was the only one who knew before I came out. I'm pretty sure it was the counselor, her, and me, obviously. Yeah. And that was it, because I was like, I didn't want to come out, one, before I was ready, but but also before I knew for sure. Like,
absolutely.
I had a lot of worries about confusing people, and like if I was unsure, or, you know. And
that's a very genuine fear. Or you don't want to tell people one thing and then you're like, actually, never mind.
But it was a lot of it through her support and my counselor's support. And then I went to Sydney, and when I got back from Sydney, I just ripped the Band-Aid off. Like, I came back from Sydney because Sydney was my birthday. I came back from Sydney and was celebrating all my birthdays, and I think I was like, to everyone I was seeing that weekend after my birthday, for my birthday, I was like, by the way, it's Sam, it's they, them.
Yeah, welcome, Sam.
Yeah. Have there been anything with your identity that you've had to work on?
Definitely not to the extent that you've had, but, you know, obviously with the eating disorder recovery, as I mentioned earlier, sort of being able to separate my identity from that of the eating disorder, or, you know, the depression or the anxiety, or, you know, no, definitely not to your extent, but just sort of being able to acknowledge and identify when it's not me, when it's the mental illness, so as to speak. It's the mental illness. It's the depression for me, you know? Yeah. To be fair, recovering from my eating disorder, well, I still consider myself to be in recovery, is when I first started, it was so scary for me because I didn't want to lose that part of me. It was something in my mind that I had worked so hard for. I had done all this hard work, and then just for all that work and for like identity to be erased, I guess. So sometimes I still do find myself trying to hold on to that part of me. Less so now that I'm doing better, but definitely in the early stages, it was very, very tough. I remember crying, being like, I don't want to do this. And, you know, recovering from an eating disorder is hard, as you would know.
Oh, yeah. I remember when I first started with my current psychologist, she made me write a list of pros and cons for recovery. She was like, yeah, you probably are not going to want to give this up right away. Yeah. Turns out she was totally right, because it took me 3 years to be like, you know what, I'm ready now. But I very much relate to that. Like, it does feel, for me, I felt that I'd put in a lot of effort. I was like, what are you telling me? I just wasted the last 15 years of my life?
Exactly.
No, thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
And because recovery is hard as well, you know, I definitely had days where I didn't think it was worth it, or it didn't feel worth it. Yeah. I know now that that's so not true. And if you are listening and you're in that, it is so worth it. Like this morning I tried a bagel for the first time.
Ooh,
I know,
nice.
I'd never had a bagel. I think actually that's the most exciting thing, is there's so many foods that I haven't eaten.
I know.
And I was like, I get to try this thing. I'm like a little kid.
Well, the first time I tried like an almond croissant, My
I
gosh,
remember
I'm
how
like,
excited you were about trying all these different croissants.
Yeah.
You were like showing me pictures of croissants
I
outside
know.
the coffee shop. You're like, I tried this one and this one. And seeing the excitement on your
Yeah.
face to me was what, like, I was like, I'm so proud that you're trying this, but also that you had this excitement about trying it instead of this fear
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
whatever fear might be behind that. There's other people in my life that I've seen recover, and watching them grow and get the confidence back and the life back, because I've watched people have eating disorders. I'm sure that other people saw this in me, but and it definitely felt to me that a piece of me kind of died the longer I was in my eating disorder. Like it is a deadly disorder, and finding that spark again in me, seeing it come back in other, like I've seen it in you, in other people that I know, like this spark come back, and having, you know, we can have conversations about food now. You know, I don't have to worry that you're gonna like leave the conversation and be like a ball on the floor crying because, oh my God, how could I? But also I know people don't have that same fear with me. You know?
Exactly.
And and that's beautiful, and it can be really challenging. I don't know, like especially when you've got friends or loved ones that also, like if you're both navigating recovery, that can be really challenging.
Yeah,
I know,
especially oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was going to say, and I know that for a while we had to have some boundaries because it wasn't helpful for either of us. And also being able to set those boundaries, like that's scary as well. You know?
Yeah, I know, because as you're probably aware, how competitive eating disorders are. So I know it was like at the time it was very important for us to set those boundaries. So we're not almost competing with one another, you know. I think a nice little way to wrap this up would be, what does queerness mean to you, and how does being queer feel? And
I mean, I speak from my experience, and I do not speak for every person in the LGBTQ plus umbrella. But I mean, I talk about queerness in kind of two different fashions. One, my sexuality, but then also my gender identity as well. And I mean, I personally use it mostly as a umbrella term to kind of sometimes bring them together a little bit. Like, I am a queer person. Sometimes it feels like the acronym can be a bit mouthfully, but also recognize that it's important. Like, every part of it is important, like of the acronym is important to use and to, but it's just, you know, it's just my way of, I don't really know what it means to me specifically, other than it's just a part of my identity. And it's not my whole identity. Like, I'm not just a queer person. You know, I'm not just non-binary, I'm not just bisexual. Like, it's not just my, like I talked about earlier, like I have all these other things as well. But I think and I'm very fortunate in the fact that I am in safe spaces that I can express my gender and my sexuality. I'm in spaces that, you know, I'm very lucky. My family do have issues using my pronouns, but they're still accepting that that's how I identify. Not everyone is fortunate. That is very much a privilege that I have. I'm a firm believer in like tiered privileges. Like, I may be privileged in one area and not in others, and that's kind of how I see privilege. But I'm very, very fortunate that I'm surrounded by people who I'm safe with, that I can be myself with. And I'm very aware not everyone has that experience. Not everyone, you know, not everyone gets that opportunity. And I'm very lucky to have that.
That's amazing that you're able to live your life as who you want to be.
Very much so. Is there any kind of like last thoughts you had on what it means to be a woman? That's a really broad question.
Oh gosh. Don't get me wrong, I love being a woman, love feeling empowered, you know, but also it can be hard at times, you know. I'm happy being who I am, and you're happy being who you are. And I think as long as everyone's happy with who they are, you know, that's all that should matter.
So that's kind of it for today's episode. Next week, we're going to be talking about joints. Shauna's experience with like hypermobility and hip dysplasia. Maybe some of my experiences having arthritis, and the fact that I crack all the time like a glow stick.
Same. I just really cracking.
Just
here.
crack.
It'll be a cracking episode.
So it'll be a nice change. We've talked a lot so far about mental health, and it'd be really good, I think, to get into some physical health stuff because,
Absolutely.
you know, that also impacts both of us. Yep. Physical health issues impact both of us. And as always, I'm going to do the little social media spiel. We have an Instagram. If you want to follow us on Instagram for various posts, behind the scenes footage, things like that, it's at halfway to healing with underscores between the words. It'll also be on the screen, so you can type it in. And like, subscribe, comment if you have questions or want to get into the conversation. And it's been really fun talking this episode.
Yeah. Have a good week, everybody.